and it's so aligned with the way I think and, my beliefs. And occasionally I will meet people who are not, and then I kind of get thrown back, like, oh, who are you? You're suddenly in my orbit. You don't understand me. Like, what? That's not the norm anymore. So it's been an interesting journey for me. And to also leave the ones that are not following me and not look back, and just keep going. I think it's also been an important lesson for me to learn.
It's such a big one, such an important lesson. I actually wrote a post this morning, a Facebook post that said, what if we could take everything we're afraid of other people thinking about us and realize that those things are actually our superpowers? So, and I had a conversation with a woman who was afraid that if she really went for the amazing creative things that she wanted to go for in her life, that she would be considered a freak. And I said to her, you are a freak, embrace it. So I know, and it's funny, right? It makes you laugh to think about that. But the things we're so afraid that other people are going to think about us are actually the things that make us creative geniuses and brilliant and amazing and world changers. And I don't know about you. Actually, I do know about you, Gila. We're both doing the experiment right now, right? That was the other part of the post. Like, hey, I'm doing that experiment because you know what? It's like way more fun to live that way than to continue to live under everybody else's rules and thumb and just feel squashed and small all the time. I've got big things to do in the world. And so it's really tough to constantly be suffocated by what everyone else thinks and worry about that and let it paralyze me. That's like a waste of my time at this point. I'm not telling you it's easy. I'm just telling you I'm learning about how to deal and move through it. And that is freeing.
Yes. And, it's funny that you mentioned that because my kids, it's almost the end of the year. And there's all sorts of parties and everything and, things that you need to do. And, they're like, well, they tell me, in Hebrew, it's Ima. So like, Ima, if you don't do this, that's just not cool. I'm like, I don't care what's cool, what's not cool. Like, I'm just doing whatever. You haven't learned that yet from me. there is, real peer pressure, and especially in schools, especially with children. And the one thing I just wanted to say is that as you are going through this change of awareness, and Laura and I have talked about this before, your children are transforming as well, in their own way. It's nothing is overnight. It's a journey, but I have seen my children there are now different children than they were a year ago. And, we're still wading through that, but it's been amazing to see them transform.
That's such an awesome point too. If you have kids or even nieces or nephews or kids in your vicinity who are paying attention to you and what you're doing, when you celebrate your own uniqueness, let alone theirs, which we are trying to do. I'm telling you, if you survive school with a thread of that left, you're lucky, right? You're lucky. And I'm trying to do the same thing. It's help my kids understand that fitting in it's not always about that, but that is so difficult in a society that it's so strong, it's so conditioned that that's what you're supposed to do, and there's something about feeling good about yourself if you have fit in. Rather than celebrating your unique differences, which I think the awareness about this topic is much greater than it used to be. And that makes me happy. And even conversations like this today are a part of that,
That's true. I did want to touch on something else. It's something I've been exploring on my own. If anyone's been following me on Medium or seen any of my writing on wildwritersheal.com, is this, showing up in our darkness, in the anger, in the face of the unknown. I've encountered recently that I've been stuffing my anger down for many, many years. I haven't been dealing with it. And I just wanted to know, like what your thoughts are about that, how you feel about just, being in that state of, if it's unknown, it doesn't have to be anything specifically, but just in that state of darkness and coming from that place, because I think actually there can be light in the darkness.
This is such a loaded topic, right? So in my healing career, part of our training is to go to classes, work on each other, get the work, receive the work. And in the myofascial release world, we learn under one particular teacher who I adore, John Barnes, myofascial release, and his mind, body, soul way of going about healing is there's a piece of exactly what you're talking about. And it's essentially, it's tough to put into a few words, but essentially it's giving yourself permission to feel that anger. But you know what? It's rage. It's not anger. And so I'll show up to some of these courses with my colleagues, and we're laying on the massage tables all together, and we're all, listening to what he's talking about, doing particular techniques with each other, practicing. And in something called myofascial unwinding, the body can take on the emotional trauma, emotional, physical trauma of the past. And you're facilitating a healing process in another human being that brings up those somatoemotional sensations. And many, many, many times it's anger and rage. And so that's scary. And it's scary as a receiver of the work, because when you felt that maybe as a little girl, there was no safe way to express it. Your parents were constantly trying to shut you up, especially if you were in like a public place having a temper tantrum or whatever, that was a big fat no. And so what you learned was that it wasn't safe to be angry. And then I don't know about your world, but in my world, it was more like, being quiet was safer. And so there was never any out loud expression of almost anything. Forget anger. Oh my God. Because if you started to go down that road, there could be consequences like punishment, So hopping back to the healing scenario, these things come up over and over again in those rooms with each other. And we've learned to not only give ourselves permission to feel it, but also assist others in that process, which is an extremely powerful thing. Now, maybe you guys are wondering if I've ever been able to touch on that myself. I believe there's probably a little anger and or rage in all of us that needs to surface and release. That one's been very tough for me. I've gotten to places where it's come up to the surface and I still am unable to verbally express the primal scream that I actually feel physically inside of me, and so I just have to come back at myself with some self-compassion. That little girl that shows up in those moments, she's terrified. And so I hold her hand nowadays, and when I receive the work, I'm very conscious of the feeling, and I allow myself to go wherever I need to go in the moment to do that little chunk of healing that needs to happen. And I think some days that's the best we can do.
Yes, I hear you. I'm just starting this journey, and especially with my anger, and I'm trying to embrace it. I've held it down for so long in so many different situations, and I still remember the times when I was jumping on the sofa. If my brothers and sisters are listening, they'll remember it too. And I was just screaming uncontrollable. Who knows why? Who knows what's going on as a child? And maybe it was just to be seen and heard. I'm not quite sure really now, but I'm really just I am just embracing it. I'm embracing all of me, because I think that that's where, for many of us, that's maybe where our power lies, that we need to unlock that door and let it come out, because for whatever reasons we've been held down for so long, and we need, because each of us have this, Laura and I have discussed this before, like each of us have these unique skills and talents that we're here to really share in the world. And if you're listening to this is what my podcast is really all about. To be erotic is to be about your desires, to be about who you are authentically. And I would be remiss to not mention this publication that Laura and I have jointly co-authored, or I'm not sure what the right, co-founded, I'm sure, yeah, co-founded on Medium. It's called Sacred Erotic Self. And, I'll let Laura talk a little bit about that, but, it's actually about what I'm doing right now, just really being unapologetically erotic in whatever way we see fit, and publishing it, for people to see, either with a partner, without a partner. There's something really natural and primal about being sexually open about your desires.
Well, creative sexual energy is creative energy. They are one and the same. And I know when I had the moment of realization of awakening up inside of my body in all of those ways, it was happening all together. There was a creative connection and a creative flow. And there was also a very palpable feeling of sensual energy in me too. And so learning about how those are one and the same it seems so funny because you kind of want to go, well, duh, right? But it isn't a duh to a lot of people. A lot of people have to discover that they're one and the same. And when you are embracing one, you're embracing the other. You are living inside of your creative self when you feel those feelings. But man, oh man, could we have a discussion about what you're taught as a kid? So, right. So, maybe what you're taught is quite the opposite, that it's bad, that it's dirty, that you shouldn't talk about it, that you should, right? We could make that list 100 miles long. So this is, we're talking about sometimes a lifetime of unlearning here. And I know you were telling me the other day that somebody had unfriended you because of your bio. That cracked me up. But, we have to realize that some people are inside of their fear so much so still. They have been taught to fear talking about it. So they don't want to be friends with somebody who's talking about it because they are thinking about themselves personally and what that might mean, what people might think of them if they have friended somebody who has a bio with the word sex in it, God forbid, right? Oh my goodness. So anyway, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. This topic.
Well, it's all related, because we were talking about just the peer pressure in the school, and it's actually a similar thing. It's about being aware of your body, being aware of who you are, not just, in a sexual way, but it's all part of a human experience.
Exactly.
And whatever messages, part of what I understand from your book and our experiences together is, our body, our heart, our soul, our mind, they're all giving us messages to help us to be the person that we are meant to be, to rise to that calling. Maybe we can discuss that, and then we'll talk about your free gift as we end the call. If you want to just talk about, the soul's calling and how you talked about that in your book.
Yes, that's a deep ache when you feel that. That's getting back to our talk about being able to feel your body as a language of your soul and your intuition. And when that ache started to get very strong inside of me to the point that, now I'm talking about it negatively, meaning it was burning so deep that it was basically telling me, you need to make a change. You need to make a change. And it was in the form of chest pain for me. It's different for everybody. And I felt it. It wasn't like I hadn't been practicing this. And I knew it was there, and I was in a bit of denial. I was terrified about making big changes in my life, what that would mean. Ultimately, it meant a divorce for me. And that's a whole nother day's topic. However, when I finally surrendered and accepted that I actually knew the language, I understood what it was saying to me, and then it was up to me. So with awareness, I had a choice. I could either take an action that would free me, or I could continue living in the way that I was in the middle of a very kind of small, constricted, resentful life. And at that point, it was my choice. And so what choice did I have at that point? I mean, if you're awake and aware to it, and you don't follow it, that's your bad, right? So, so being who I am and